"Stop! This house is about to blow." The words tore from Malik Johnson's throat as he rushed up the narrow walkway of the townhouse in Westchester. The air was thick with the sharp, metallic tang of gas, a smell that made his gut twist. He had been in enough hazardous jobs to recognize danger long before it announced itself, and tonight every instinct screamed that time was running out. His boots struck the stone steps hard as he shoved the door open. Inside, the townhouse looked like any polished suburban home, hardwood floors gleaming, framed art lining the walls, but beneath the surface, an invisible death was waiting. Malik's heart hammered as he called out again, louder, "Stop! Gas leak! You've got to get out now!" His eyes landed on her. Cassandra Wyatt appeared at the end of the hallway, framed by the soft golden light spilling from the kitchen. Her posture was regal, chin lifted, arms crossed. At 38, she was the kind of woman who graced magazine covers impeccably dressed, every detail calculated, every step deliberate. But her eyes were narrowed, cold and skeptical. "Who exactly do you think you are?" she demanded, her tone slicing the air like glass. Malik, tall and broad-shouldered, kept his voice urgent but respectful. "Name's Malik Johnson. I work electrical and contracting in the area. I smelled the leak from outside. You've got to get out right now." "Oh." Her lips curved into a thin smile, one that carried more disdain than gratitude. "So, a handyman thinks he can storm into my home and bark orders at me? That's cute." She gave a small, dismissive laugh. "I don't take instructions from strangers who force their way in." He stepped closer, heat rising in his chest. "Ma'am, I'm not playing. The second you flip a switch, this place is going to turn into a fireball. You've got to trust me." Her gaze didn't soften. "Trust? From you? No, I don't need rescuing." With that, she turned her back on him, heels clicking sharply against the floor, and strode into the kitchen with the kind of blind confidence only privilege could afford. "Don't!" Malik shouted, lunging forward. But the click of the light switch was faster. A muffled boom thundered from the basement, shaking the walls, rattling the glass in the frames. The floor trembled beneath their feet as fire leapt upward, orange light bursting from the stairwell like the breath of some monster finally unleashed. Cassandra froze for a split second, her face draining of color. Then Malik was on her, arms wrapping around her torso, yanking her back with a strength born of desperation. Heat seared the air behind them as another explosion shattered a kitchen window, spraying shards across the room. Malik barreled toward the back door, dragging her with him. She struggled, coughing, the smell of burning gas clawing at her throat. He kicked the door wide, hauling her onto the damp grass of the yard, just as a surge of flames shot skyward, painting the night orange. A neighbor's dog barked madly, chains clattering against its fence, while people poured out of their houses shouting. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail, growing closer with every breath. Cassandra collapsed onto the lawn, doubled over, hacking as smoke poured from her lungs. Malik crouched beside her, his hands steadying her shoulders. "You're safe. Just breathe," he urged, his own chest heaving. She shoved him away, raising a hand as though his touch burned worse than the fire. Reporters and neighbors converged, cell phone cameras flashing. A young journalist called out, "Miss Wyatt, how did you make it out alive?" Cassandra straightened her spine despite the soot on her blouse, the mess of her hair. Her eyes flicked briefly to Malik, standing grim and silent by the steps, his face streaked with ash. For an instant, something unreadable passed across her features. But then she turned back to the crowd, her voice cool and commanding. "I survived by luck," she declared, words slicing clean through the night. "No one saved me." The sentence was a blade. Malik felt it sink into him deeper than the blast had. His muscles ached from hauling her through fire, his lungs burned with smoke, but she erased him in front of them all, as if he had never existed. Cassandra lifted her chin, signaling to her security team. They arrived quickly, guiding her toward a sleek black SUV idling at the curb. Flashbulbs snapped, voices shouted questions, but she brushed them off with a wave, coughing lightly into her hand, yet refusing to appear weak. Malik stayed rooted where he stood, fists clenched, watching her leave. The firefighters rushed past him, hoses blasting, shouts filling the night as they tried to contain the blaze. The townhouse groaned under the strain of the fire chewing through its beams, windows glowing red against the dark. As the SUV door shut behind Cassandra and carried her away, Malik whispered under his breath, almost to himself. "I told you." His voice was low, bitter, and full of a sorrow older than this night. He turned back toward the flames, the reflection dancing in his eyes, and for the first time in years, he wondered if saving someone who didn't want saving was worth the cost. The boom hadn't ended when Malik dragged Cassandra across the lawn. The ground trembled again, and a second eruption sent a hot gust whipping past them, tossing leaves into the air. The townhouse behind them glowed like a furnace, kitchen windows blown wide, shards of glass scattered across the grass. The smell of burning wood and gas stung every breath. Cassandra stumbled to her knees, coughing violently, her palms pressed against the damp earth as if the ground itself was the only steady thing left. Malik crouched beside her, his broad frame shielding her from falling debris. His ears rang from the force of the blast, but his voice still pushed through. "Stay low, keep breathing." He pulled the hem of his shirt to cover his nose and mouth, instinctively reaching to drape the cloth over hers. Cassandra slapped his hand away, her pride intact even while her lungs burned. "I don't need," another cough seized her, "help from you." And sick. Neighbors had poured into the street now, some barefoot in pajamas, others with cell phones raised to record. A child clung to her father's leg, wide-eyed at the flames curling into the sky. From down the block, the high-pitched wail of sirens grew louder. Malik could already picture the fire engines barreling toward them, but every second felt stretched and dangerous, as if one wrong move would set off another chain of explosions. "Clear the yard," a man shouted from a porch, his voice tight with fear. A woman clasped her hands together, murmuring, "Lord, have mercy," over and over. Malik rose to his feet, scanning for hazards. Sparks still spat from the basement windows, where the blast had blown the frames apart. He recognized the smell of accelerant, lingering even stronger now, but he bit down on the thought. This wasn't the time to analyze. It was the time to survive. He turned back to Cassandra, who was staggering upright, her blouse smudged with soot, her jaw set as if sheer will could make her look untouched. "Ma'am, you need medical attention," Malik said firmly. Cassandra brushed ash from her sleeve, straightening her spine despite the tremor in her hands. "What I need is space." She coughed again but forced composure, the way CEOs did at shareholder meetings when the numbers looked grim. Already, a few reporters had arrived, tipped off by the scanner chatter. A young man with a press badge ducked under yellow tape, microphone raised. "Miss Wyatt, can you tell us what happened? How did you survive the blast?" Malik's chest heaved, his shirt soaked with sweat. He wanted to speak, to tell the truth, to shout it out before the lie took root. But Cassandra beat him to it. Her chin lifted, her voice cutting clean through the chaos. "I survived by luck," she declared. "No one saved me." The words echoed across the yard, picked up instantly by the eager pens and microphones. Neighbors gasped, some staring at Malik, expecting him to protest. He didn't. His throat was dry, his fists clenched. Anger pulsed through him, sharp and hot, but beneath it was an older ache, the kind that came from too many years of being invisible, erased, or worse, framed as the problem. Cassandra moved toward her waiting SUV, black paint gleaming under the wash of firelight. Her security team, belatedly arriving, surrounded her, ushering her past the gawking crowd. She gave one final cough, pulled her jacket tight, and slipped inside the vehicle, as if nothing had touched her at all. Malik stayed rooted on the lawn. Firefighters stormed the scene, dragging heavy hoses, barking orders. "Back up, keep clear." Water hissed as it hit the flames, steam rising into the night. One of the men glanced at Malik, recognition in his eyes. A fellow tradesman who could see the soot, the sweat, the fight still etched on him. Malik nodded once but said nothing. Behind him, the press continued their chatter. Lucky escape, CEO unharmed. The narrative was already forming, a neat package for morning news. He was nowhere in it. Ray's voice came back to him, memory sharp. "Silence is what buries the truth, son." Malik inhaled, the smoke scratching at his throat, and for the first time tonight, he wasn't sure if speaking would matter. Cassandra had the money, the power, the cameras. All he had was the truth, and already it was slipping away into the night air. The townhouse groaned under the assault of fire hoses, windows popping, beams collapsing in showers of sparks. Malik turned from it slowly, the reflection of orange flames flickering in his dark eyes. He had done what he came to do, save a life. Yet he felt no triumph, no relief. Only the weight of being dismissed, denied, turned into nothing but a shadow in someone else's story. He walked back to his old Ford pickup, the engine still warm, the cab smelling faintly of coffee and oil. Sliding into the driver's seat, he rested his forehead against the steering wheel for a long moment. Outside, the chaos continued: sirens, voices, fire. Inside the truck, silence pressed in. He whispered once, softly, "You'll see. Truth doesn't stay buried forever." Then he turned the key, headlights cutting across the street, and drove away as smoke rolled higher into the night sky. By morning, the fire at Cassandra Wyatt's townhouse was old news, reduced to a scrolling headline on local TV. Billionaire CEO narrowly escapes gas explosion, calls survival luck. For Malik Johnson, it was anything but background noise. His phone had already rung 3 times before sunrise, each call leaving the same message: police requesting him to come in for questioning. He had lain awake in his modest apartment above the auto garage, the smell of smoke still clinging to his clothes, trying to make sense of how saving a life had turned into this. When he finally walked into the precinct, his toolbox and truck keys were seized as potential evidence. An officer with polite detachment informed him, "Standard procedure, just cooperating with the investigation." But Malik saw the way the officer's gaze lingered, a flicker of suspicion that had nothing to do with procedure. Sitting on the hard wooden chair in the interview room, Malik's mind replayed the night before. Cassandra's coughs, her trembling frame, the weight of her in his arms as he dragged her through smoke. And then her words, cold, dismissive, erasing him from existence in front of cameras. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion bleeding into anger. Hours later, when they finally released him, his pickup sat abandoned in the lot, tires chalk-marked, the hood popped open like it was a crime scene itself. He climbed inside, started the engine, and caught his reflection in the cracked rearview mirror. Soot still under his nails, eyes red from smoke and sleeplessness. He muttered, "Hero one night, suspect the next. That's the story, isn't it?" Across town, Cassandra was already in damage control mode. She stood at her lawyer Margaret's office, sleek and defiant despite the faint rasp in her voice. Margaret, sharp-eyed and calm, slid a legal document across the desk. "You've officially filed suit against him. Trespassing, unlawful entry. We'll position it as a precaution. You can't risk strangers storming your property, not with your profile." Cassandra nodded curtly, though her mind flickered back to the moment Malik's arms had pulled her out of the fire. She shook the memory away like dust from her sleeve. "He forced his way in," she insisted. "It's not complicated." Margaret leaned back, studying her client. "Victor Hale will like this move. He's already doing the press rounds. Says the explosion was probably negligence, contractor error." Cassandra's jaw tightened. Victor, her CFO, polished and powerful, had been quick to step into the spotlight. She knew his words carried weight. Investors would hear him before they heard her. Still, she kept her face steady. Victor's job is to keep the numbers clean. Let him talk. Later that afternoon, Malik caught the soundbite himself while grabbing coffee at a corner shop. The small TV above the counter showed Victor, immaculate in a navy suit, telling reporters with grave authority, "These incidents often trace back to negligence. It's unfortunate, but in all likelihood a contractor's mistake. We'll cooperate fully with authorities to ensure accountability." The barista glanced at Malik, not recognizing him, just another man with tired eyes. But Malik felt the room closing in. His chest burned hotter than the fire he'd pulled Cassandra from. Negligence? He hadn't even been hired for her house. He had been a passerby, drawn by instinct. Now they were painting him as the villain. Driving away, Malik's thoughts tumbled. His father's voice echoed from years ago, a lesson hammered into him as a young man struggling to find footing in a world that didn't want him to rise. "In this country, son, truth is too often buried under power. If you don't fight for it, it'll vanish like smoke." Malik gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, the weight of that truth pressing down heavier than ever. Meanwhile, Cassandra stood before a cracked mirror in a temporary hotel suite, brushing soot from her hair with slow, deliberate strokes. Outside, the city buzzed, but inside she found only silence. She thought of Malik again, the heat of his hand gripping her wrist, the sound of urgency in his voice when he shouted that warning. For a heartbeat, She wondered if she had gone too far. But the moment passed. Pride was armor, and she wore it tightly. "I survived by luck," she whispered to her reflection, reaffirming the lie until it felt almost true. That evening, Malik returned to his apartment above the garage. His mentor Ray was waiting on the stoop, a hulking figure even in retirement. His firefighter's shoulders stooped but still formidable. Ray held out a takeout bag of fried chicken, his version of comfort. "Heard the news, son," he said, voice gravelly. "You all right?" Malik sighed, lowering onto the steps beside him. "They've twisted it, Ray. She sued me. Victor's pinning it on me. I saved her, and now I'm the villain." Ray cracked open the bag, handing Malik a drumstick. "I've been in burning houses, seen good men fall. But you? You're still standing. You know what that means? You got a choice. Either let them bury you alive, or fight back." Malik bit into the food, the grease hot and familiar, grounding him in a world that made sense. He stared out at the street, dusk settling over the neighborhood. Children rode bikes. A mother called her kids in for dinner, the everyday rhythm of life continuing as if his world hadn't just collapsed. His jaw tightened. "Fight back," he repeated. "But how, Ray? Against her? Against Victor?" Ray's gaze was steady, his weathered hand gripping Malik's shoulder. "Truth's a stubborn thing. You can try to bury it, but it leaks out, like gas, like smoke. Your job is to make sure it finds air." "Eh." Malik leaned back, the night sounds wrapping around him, crickets, distant laughter, the hum of cars on the main road. Somewhere across town, Cassandra Wyatt was likely sipping expensive wine, surrounded by advisors telling her she was untouchable. But Malik knew different. The truth was smoldering, and no amount of power could keep it down forever. He closed his eyes, whispering again, not as a complaint this time, but as a vow. "You'll see. Truth doesn't stay buried forever." Im 10. The night settled over New York like a heavy quilt, but neither Cassandra Wyatt nor Malik Johnson found rest. For Cassandra, the hotel suite offered no comfort. The city's lights spilled across the glass walls, her reflection staring back at her, pale and tired. Margaret, her lawyer, had returned with a stack of papers and a sharp expression. Cassandra sat at the edge of the bed, her silk blouse rumpled, her bare feet digging into the carpet. "Victor is moving faster than we expected," Margaret said, laying down the papers. "His statements are gaining traction. He's framing this as negligence and instability on your part. You know what that means." Cassandra's eyes flicked to the window, jaw clenched. "That he wants me out," she murmured. Margaret nodded, her voice even. "Victor's not just protecting the company. He's positioning himself. You've always known he wanted more control. But this is a direct play. If the board believes you ignored a gas leak or mishandled your own home safety, it gives him ammunition. He'll push you aside." Cassandra's lips thinned, but her pride didn't waver. "He won't succeed. I built this empire. He manages numbers. I built the vision." Margaret's eyes softened with something almost like pity. "Vision doesn't matter if you lose credibility. You need to decide, are you going to fight him or let him bury you?" Cassandra turned away, her throat tightening. She thought of Malik again, of the urgency in his voice, of his hand gripping hers before she shoved him away. She shook it off. Trusting him was not an option. Trusting anyone had never been her way. Meanwhile, across town, Malik sat at his small kitchen table, the glow of a single lamp pooling over unpaid bills and the crumpled notice of Cassandra's lawsuit. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion dragging at his bones. Ray's words still echoed, "Fight back or be buried." But how did one man fight someone like Cassandra Wyatt, let alone Victor Hale? His phone buzzed. "No name, just a number," he answered anyway. "Johnson?" a gruff voice asked. Malik frowned. "Yeah, who's this?" A pause, then a click. Silence. He set the phone down, unease curling in his stomach. Later that night, he stepped outside, drawn by restlessness. The garage beneath his apartment smelled of oil and rubber, the familiar scents grounding him. He lit a cigarette, though he rarely smoked, and leaned against his truck. Across the street, a group of neighborhood kids played basketball under a dim hoop, their laughter echoing into the night. For a moment, Malik envied their simplicity, the way the world hadn't yet taught them about betrayal and power. Then his gaze shifted to the distant skyline, glowing with wealth and ambition, the world Cassandra lived in, where men like Victor played with lives like they were numbers on a page. He exhaled smoke and muttered, "One of us is going to burn, not me." Back in her suite, Cassandra poured herself a glass of red wine, though it tasted like ash in her mouth. Margaret had left, promising to return in the morning with strategy options. Alone, Cassandra set the glass down and walked to the window. Below, the city pulsed, indifferent to her struggles. She thought of her father, a man who had built fortunes on steel and sweat, a man who had always said, "Never admit weakness, never show you need anyone." She had taken that advice and carved herself into the woman who owned boardrooms, who commanded respect, who never bent, and yet, the memory of Malik dragging her through fire gnawed at her pride. She hated that she remembered his touch, his warning, the way his voice had cracked with urgency. She hated even more that he might have been right, but pride was armor, and she would not remove it. Not yet. The next day brought headlines harsher than fire. News outlets replayed Victor's statements, splicing them with footage of Cassandra coughing on her lawn, soot streaking her blouse. Was the CEO reckless? One anchor asked. Did negligence nearly cost her life? Investors called, board members whispered, and Cassandra felt the weight of eyes turning on her. She slammed her laptop shut, her breath sharp. For the first time in years, control was slipping through her fingers. At that same hour, Malik sat with Ray on the stoop again. The older man sipped coffee from a chipped mug, watching Malik with steady eyes. "You're thinking too much," Ray said. Malik let out a bitter laugh. "I've been sued, blamed, stripped of my tools, and painted as a criminal. Thinking is all I've got left." Ray leaned forward. "Thinking won't clear your name. Action will. You know something's off. That explosion wasn't chance. You saw the stains, smelled the accelerant. You gonna let them pin this on you while the real culprit walks?" Malik's chest tightened. He remembered the slick sheen on the basement floor, the unnatural smell beneath the gas. He had tried to bury the thought under anger, but Ray was right. It hadn't been an accident. Night fell again, drawing both Cassandra and Malik deeper into their corners. Cassandra sat before a mirror, stripping makeup from her tired face, rehearsing what she might tell the board. Malik hunched over his workbench, cleaning tools the police hadn't confiscated, his mind replaying every second in that house. In their own spaces, both faced crossroads neither had wanted. Cassandra forced to admit she was no longer untouchable. Malik forced to decide if he would let himself be destroyed or fight for the truth. Cassandra's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Accidents don't happen twice. Stay in your place." She stared at it, her blood chilling. Pride told her to delete it, to ignore the threat. But for the first time, fear slipped past her armor. Across the city, Malik finally whispered the decision aloud, a vow to himself and to the empty night air. "I won't let them bury me." The stage was set. Two lives, scarred by fire and lies, now stood at the edge of decisions that would bind them together. One, a woman who trusted no one. The other, a man already marked guilty by power he couldn't match. Both would soon discover that survival wasn't luck, it was war. The smell of smoke still lingered days later, clinging to the ruined frame of Cassandra Wyatt's townhouse. The street had mostly returned to normal neighbors, trimmed hedges, children biked along sidewalks, life moving forward as if catastrophe were just another local headline. But the house itself was scarred, windows boarded, the lawn littered with debris. Cassandra stood at the edge of the property in dark sunglasses and a gray coat, her driver waiting discreetly by the curb. She had avoided coming back, preferring the sterile walls of her hotel suite, but something had pulled her here tonight, some need to face what she'd lost, to remind herself she still owned it. She inhaled deeply, the air acrid, and stepped through the half-hinged front gate. The boards creaked under her heels. Inside, the foyer was blackened, soot climbing the walls like claws. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the fire hoses that had soaked the place days before. Cassandra walked deeper, her eyes tracing the destruction, her pride whispering she had survived, that she was untouchable. But her gut buried beneath layers of denial twisted. She stopped abruptly. A beam of light cut through the dark ahead, sliding across scorched walls. Cassandra stiffened. "Who's there?" she called, voice sharp. The beam stilled, then turned, and the man she least wanted to see stepped from the shadows. Malik Johnson, flashlight in hand, his shirt marked with dried soot and a faint bandage across his forehead. His expression was unreadable, but his presence filled the room with raw tension. "You again?" Cassandra's voice dripped disdain. "Didn't the lawsuit make it clear? This is still my house. You don't belong here." "Imp." Malik's tone was steady, though his jaw clenched. "Neither does whoever tried to kill you." He lifted the beam, shining it toward the floor. Cassandra followed it, her eyes narrowing. There, in the corner near the basement door, dark stains pooled in irregular patterns across the concrete. They shimmered faintly under the flashlight, too viscous, too wrong to be just water. "Accelerant," Malik said quietly. "I've seen it before on job sites. Someone poured this down here. This wasn't just a leak." Cassandra laughed, sharp and cold, as if the sound alone could cut through his words. "Do you expect me to believe this? That a stranger with a tool belt knows more than the investigators?" She took a step closer, her perfume faint even against the smoke. "I don't trust you, Mr. Johnson. Not your story, not your warnings, and certainly not your presence in my home." Malik's eyes locked on hers, unwavering. "You don't have to trust me, but facts don't care what you believe. Someone wanted this place to burn with you inside. You can keep pretending luck saved you, but next time you won't walk out." Cassandra's chest tightened despite herself. She turned her head away, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing doubt flicker in her eyes. For years she had thrived on control, on believing she was her own savior, untouched by weakness. To admit this man might be right felt like surrender, and surrender was not in her vocabulary. She forced her voice cool again. "You shouldn't be here. Leave before I call the police." Malik lowered the flashlight, but not his stare. "Call them. Maybe they'll finally look where they should have the first night." He moved past her, boots crunching over glass shards, and headed toward the door. For a moment, Cassandra almost called after him, almost demanded more answers. Instead, she stood silent, her pride and fear warring in her chest, the smell of accelerant clinging to her thoughts long after the beam of his flashlight disappeared. Outside, Malik paused at the curb, drawing in the night air. His heart hammered from the confrontation, but more than that from the knowledge that the woman he saved was still blind to danger. He rubbed his bandaged forehead, muttering to himself, "She won't listen. Not yet." His gaze drifted back to the house, glowing faintly under the streetlights, a tomb waiting to be finished. He swore quietly, "I'll find who did this, with or without her." Back inside, Cassandra remained frozen in the foyer, the silence pressing heavier now. She told herself he was lying, that it was another attempt to insert himself into her story. Yet when she finally turned her eyes to the stain on the floor, something inside her shifted. The dark patch seemed to glisten back at her, accusing, undeniable. She wrapped her coat tighter and whispered into the empty air, "Luck." But the word no longer rang as confidently as it once had. That night, sleep evaded them both. In her hotel suite, Cassandra lay restless, replaying Malik's words, hearing again his shout, "Stop, this house is about to blow," and wondering, for the first time, if survival had been less about luck and more about a truth she refused to see. Across town, Malik sat at his workbench, flipping open a battered notebook, scribbling details, stain pattern, location, smell. He underlined one word twice, intentional. Then he leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know yet how deep Victor's shadow reached, but he felt it closing in. Neither knew their paths had already intertwined tighter than either wanted. Both felt the ground shifting under them, forcing them toward a truth that would not stay buried, no matter how much pride or power tried to smother it. The ruined townhouse groaned in the silence, boards shifting as the night wind crept through shattered windows. Cassandra stood rigid in the foyer, the smell of char and damp plaster heavy around her, when a sudden thud from the back door made her start. Malik, still near the entry, turned sharply, flashlight beam slicing through the smoke-stained air. "Stay behind me," he ordered without hesitation. Cassandra bristled at the command, ready to snap back, but the words caught in her throat as the back door flew inward. A figure surged through the shadows, face hidden by a ski mask, a crowbar glinting under the beam of Malik's light. The man charged straight for Malik. The sound was immediate metal against drywall as the crowbar swung wide, smashing into the doorframe where Malik had stood a second before. Malik ducked low, shoving Cassandra back with his free arm. She stumbled against the wall, heart hammering, the arrogance that had carried her minutes earlier replaced by raw fear. "What is this? Who is he?" she gasped. Malik didn't answer. He lunged, blocking another swing with his forearm, the crowbar grazing skin. Pain flared, but adrenaline surged harder. He swung his flashlight like a weapon, its heavy metal casing cracking against the intruder's shoulder. The masked man grunted, staggered, then barreled forward again, this time driving Malik back into a half-collapsed counter. The wood splintered beneath their weight. Cassandra's scream pierced the night, echoing through the empty shell of the house. She pressed herself into the corner, trembling, her mind scrambling to piece together what she was seeing. A lawsuit couldn't explain this. Negligence didn't chase you with a crowbar. Malik caught the next strike mid-swing, his calloused hands gripping the metal, straining against the man's weight. For a breathless moment, they locked in grim silence, broken only by Cassandra's panicked gasps. Then Malik twisted sharply, wrenching the crowbar free, sending the attacker staggering back. He raised it, ready to strike, but the masked man darted toward the rear exit, vanishing into the night as quickly as he'd come. Breathing hard, Malik let the crowbar clatter to the floor. His forehead was cut, blood trickling down into his eyebrow, stinging his vision. He pressed the back of his hand to the wound, eyes still locked on the door where the man had fled. Cassandra, her knees threatening to give, forced herself upright. Her voice cracked with disbelief. You fought him off." "Oh." Malik turned slowly, his dark eyes burning with equal parts anger and exhaustion. "That man wasn't here for me, Cassandra. He came to finish what the fire didn't." He stepped closer, his frame towering in the dim light. "Still think this was luck? Still think you don't need anyone?" Cassandra opened her mouth, but nothing came. Her throat closed, words drying before they could form. For the first time in years, she felt something she hated: helplessness. Her gaze dropped to the floor where the crowbar lay, still smeared with drywall dust. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, as if to hold her pride together before it cracked apart. Malik bent down, retrieved the flashlight, and wiped at the blood on his brow. He kept his tone even, though his chest heaved. "Whoever's pulling the strings, they're not done. You keep pretending you're untouchable, they'll put you in a coffin. That's the truth." Cassandra swallowed hard, her pulse roaring in her ears. She wanted to lash out, to tell him he was wrong, that she was still in control. But the image of the masked man's crowbar slamming into the wall where her head had been a moment earlier silenced her. Her laughter, her mocking words from before, they all rang hollow now. Outside, the distant hum of traffic carried on, oblivious to the war playing out inside these scorched walls. Malik moved toward the door, tossing her one last look. "Get out of here. Stay somewhere safe. And next time you decide I'm lying, remember tonight." He stepped into the night air without waiting for her answer. Cassandra lingered alone in the foyer, her breath shallow. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the frantic beat of her heart, and whispered, almost to herself, "Who would want me dead?" For a woman who trusted no one, the question carried a weight she could no longer ignore. She finally stepped outside, the cool night breeze brushing against her skin, carrying away some of the acrid smoke. Her driver hurried up, alarm etched across his face. "Miss Wyatt, are you all right?" Cassandra nodded stiffly, sliding into the back seat of the SUV, but her eyes drifted back to the broken house, where shadows still lingered. She thought of Malik, his cut bleeding, his strength holding back death itself. She clenched her jaw and looked away, telling herself it was coincidence, that she had survived because she was strong, because she was Cassandra Wyatt. But deep down, in a place her pride refused to acknowledge, she knew the truth. She was still alive because of him. As the SUV pulled away, Malik walked alone down the block, wiping blood from his forehead with the back of his hand. His mind was already racing, replaying every detail the attackers build, his entrance, his retreat. This wasn't random, this was orchestrated. He whispered into the night, "Victor," or someone working for him. His fists clenched at his sides. The game was escalating, and now both he and Cassandra were pieces on the board. Neither of them knew that this attack was only the beginning, that the line between pride and survival would soon force them into an uneasy alliance, neither wanted but both would need. Malik woke the next morning with a dull throb above his eyebrow, where the cut had hardened into a scab. He had fallen asleep in his chair, clothes still smelling of soot and sweat, the crowbar from last night lying across the table like a reminder carved in steel. He picked it up, turned it over, studying the scratches. Whoever had sent that man hadn't come to scare him. That swing had been meant to kill. He poured cold coffee into a chipped mug, drank it bitter, and stepped outside. The first thing he saw was his truck. Both front tires were slashed clean, rubber sagging against the pavement. Malik stood there a long moment, jaw tightening, breath measured. He crouched down, touched the cut edges. It was precise, deliberate. Another message. Across town, Cassandra Wyatt tried to shake off the nightmare of the night before, but her hands still trembled when she held her morning coffee. She sat in her hotel suite, the city skyline behind her, determined to start the day like every other, disciplined, in control. She checked her email, scanned investor updates, signed off on legal drafts from Margaret, but her phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. She opened it without thinking. The words on the screen made her blood run cold. "Stay quiet, or you won't get lucky again." Cassandra stared at it, her throat tight, her pride screaming to delete it and move on, but her body betrayed her, her hand shook, her breath came shallow. She quickly locked the screen, tossed the phone onto the bed as if it had burned her fingers. That afternoon, Malik and Cassandra crossed paths again, fate pulling them into the same orbit despite her insistence on distance. They met in the parking lot outside her lawyer's office, where Malik had come to demand his tools back, confiscated by police on flimsy grounds. Cassandra exited the building with Margaret at her side, her posture regal, her heels clicking against the pavement. When her eyes landed on Malik leaning against his truck now perched awkwardly on spare tires, her expression hardened. Margaret stiffened. "Miss Wyatt, should I?" Cassandra raised a hand. "It's fine." She walked closer, her eyes cutting into him. "Still haunting my life, Mr. Johnson?" Malik straightened, wiped grease from his hands onto a rag, and met her glare evenly. "I didn't slash my own tires, Cassandra, and I know damn well you didn't send that masked man last night. So ask yourself, if not me, then who wants you dead badly enough to send killers into your house?" Cassandra's throat tightened, but she kept her mask in place. "You expect me to believe your stories? That some faceless boogeyman is after me? You broke into my house. You're lucky the police didn't keep you locked up." Malik stepped closer, his voice low, steady. "You think pride will keep you safe. Pride won't stop the blade next time. Pride won't stop the gas leak. You'll end up a headline, and Victor will shake hands at your funeral." His words cut sharper than he intended. Cassandra faltered, her lips parting, her reply lost in the truth of it. She recovered quickly, tossing her hair back, forcing disdain into her tone. "I don't need a savior, especially not one who thinks shouting makes him right." But she didn't walk away. She stood there, locked in his gaze, fighting the doubt, gnawing at her carefully built armor. For the first time, silence stretched between them, not triumphant on her end, not defensive on his, but heavy with something unspoken. Malik broke it. "Someone set that fire, Cassandra. Someone sent that man, and now they're circling closer. You can call me a liar all you want, but when the next message comes, remember this moment. Remember I told you." He wiped his hands again, tossed the rag into his truck bed, and climbed into the cab, leaving her frozen in the parking lot, Margaret staring at her with concern. That evening, Cassandra sat in her suite again, the city lights flickering against the glass. She poured herself another glass of wine, but it tasted like ash. She pulled out her phone, staring at the threatening text still burned into her screen. She considered telling Margaret, considered forwarding it to the police, but her pride whispered, silence. Admitting fear would mean admitting weakness. She locked the phone and set it aside, though her pulse wouldn't steady. Meanwhile, Malik drove through the city, restless, replaying every word exchanged with her. He wanted to shake her, to force her to see the danger closing in, but he also knew fear had already cracked her. It was pride that still held her back. He stopped at a corner gas station, filled his spare cans, and caught himself scanning the lot, searching for shadows that didn't belong. When he drove off, headlights trailed him for 3 blocks before veering away. He exhaled slowly, knowing eyes were on him. That night, Cassandra dreamed of fire again, but this time she wasn't alone. In the dream, Malik's hand pulled her through the smoke, his voice a steady anchor, yet when she turned to look at him, his face blurred into shadow. She woke with a start, breath ragged, the taste of fear bitter in her mouth. She sat on the edge of her bed, whispered fiercely to herself, "I don't need him. I don't need anyone." But the words no longer carried conviction. On the other side of the city, Malik leaned against his truck outside Ray's house. The old firefighter handed him a fresh bandage, grumbling about the cut on his forehead. "You can't fight a war alone, son," Ray said, his voice rough but steady. Malik looked away, jaw tight. "I'm not the one who needs convincing." He thought of Cassandra again, of her icy words, her trembling hands. He muttered, "She'll see. Eventually she'll see. But for now, both of them were caught in a dangerous limbo. Cassandra trapped between pride and survival, Malik hunted by shadows he could not yet name. And somewhere in the city, Victor Hale moved pieces on a board neither of them could see, counting on Cassandra's silence and Malik's isolation to finish what the fire had started. The night was colder than usual, a damp wind sweeping through the outskirts of the city where the warehouses sat like silent sentinels. Malik parked his pickup on a side street, engine off, lights dim. He had spent the last 2 days chasing leads, following paper trails that smelled as suspicious as the accelerant stains in Cassandra's basement. Receipts for industrial-grade chemicals, bulk orders filed under shell companies, all traced back to one address, a warehouse tied to a security firm owned by Victor Hale. Malik tightened his jacket, eyes scanning the wide expanse of corrugated metal buildings, each one looming in the moonlight like a sleeping beast. He didn't expect Cassandra to show up. He'd left her a single message, blunt and simple. "You want the truth? Meet me here at 9. He hadn't expected her pride to let her come. Yet headlights appeared down the street, a sleek black SUV pulling up. Cassandra stepped out, heels clicking against the pavement, her coat wrapped tightly around her. She looked at him with that same mixture of disdain and unease. "This had better not be another wild chase," she said, voice sharp. Malik didn't argue. He simply pointed toward the warehouse. "You'll want to see this." They crept along the chain-link fence, Malik cutting the padlock with a tool he'd brought, the clink of metal loud in the night. Cassandra hesitated. "Breaking and entering now?" Malik shot her a look. "If you'd rather wait until the next explosion, be my guest." For once, she had no retort. She followed. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and dark, the air heavy with the scent of oil and chemicals. Malik's flashlight beam cut through the shadows, glinting off stacks of drums and crates. Cassandra's breath caught. The drums were labeled with hazardous materials, symbols, shipments fresh, some still sealed. Malik crouched, pulling a clipboard from a crate. He handed it to her. "Look at the name on the signature line." She lifted it, her hand trembling despite herself. The signature was clear. Victor Hale. Her mouth went dry. She stared at the page, the weight of it pressing hard against the armor of her denial. Malik's voice was low, controlled. "This isn't negligence. This isn't luck. This is someone setting you up to die." Cassandra wanted to deny it, to throw the clipboard aside, but the evidence was undeniable. Still, pride clung to her words. Victor wouldn't, but even she couldn't finish the sentence. Malik leaned closer, his voice edged with steel. He would, and he did. A noise outside cut their moment short, the crunch of gravel, the distant slam of a car door. Malik snapped his flashlight off, plunging them into darkness. "Down," he hissed, pulling her behind a stack of crates. Cassandra's heart raced, pounding in her ears. 2 voices drifted through the warehouse, rough, low. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor as flashlights swept the aisles. Malik pressed close, his shoulder brushing hers as he whispered, "Don't move." Cassandra stiffened, her perfume mixing faintly with the industrial stink. She had never been this close to him, never felt the solidity of his presence in such a way. For once, she didn't pull away. The men moved slowly, their lights passing dangerously close. Cassandra held her breath, every nerve screaming to flee, but Malik's steady hand on her arm kept her still. Minutes stretched, the tension unbearable, until finally the voices receded. A door slammed, footsteps faded. Only then did Malik exhale. "We need to get out, now." They slipped back toward the exit, but the screech of tires cut through the night as they reached the street. A black SUV roared from the shadows, headlights flaring. Cassandra froze, caught in the beams like prey. Malik shoved her hard, sending her stumbling into the roadside ditch as the vehicle barreled past, close enough that she felt the wind whip her hair. Malik dove after her, pulling her down as the SUV screeched, reversed, and then sped off into the night. Cassandra lay gasping, mud on her coat, her hands trembling. Malik rose slowly, scanning the street until the taillights vanished. He turned back to her, offering his hand. She stared at it, pride warring with reality. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, letting him pull her to her feet. Her voice cracked, softer than she intended. "Without you, I'd be dead, twice." Malik didn't gloat. He simply nodded, his face grim. "Now you know this isn't a game. Whoever's behind this won't stop until one of us is gone." Cassandra looked down at the clipboard still clutched in her hand, Victor's signature staring back at her. The world she thought she controlled suddenly looked more fragile than the scorched beams of her townhouse. She straightened, her pride not gone but shaken, her voice steadier now. "Then we find him, and we stop him." For the first time, Malik saw not just the CEO who dismissed him, but a woman finally willing to face the truth. He gave a short nod. Together. As they walked back to the SUV, the city lights in the distance shimmered through the night haze. Cassandra glanced once more at the warehouse, the shadows swallowing it whole again, and she knew her life would never return to the polished certainty she once commanded. Pride had kept her alive in boardrooms, but it would not save her here. Here, survival meant trust, even if that trust rested in the hands of a man she had once mocked. The drive back into Manhattan was tense, silence thick between Cassandra and Malik as the SUV glided down the freeway. Cassandra sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hair disheveled, her coat stained with mud from the ditch. Her hands clutched the clipboard like it was a lifeline, Victor's signature glaring up at her every time she dared glance down. For once, her pride could not build a wall strong enough to erase the truth. Malik drove steady, his knuckles pale on the wheel, eyes sweeping the mirrors for headlights that lingered too long. He didn't speak until they hit the city skyline. "You saw it. You held it. Now you understand." His voice was low, not triumphant but weighted. Cassandra turned her face toward the glass, the lights flickering across her features. Her throat tightened, but she managed. "I trusted him. Victor has been by my side for years. CFO, advisor, confidant." She let out a bitter laugh, short and sharp. "And all this time," her voice cracked but she forced it steady, "he wants me gone." Malik kept his eyes on the road. "Victor doesn't just want you gone. He wants your empire, and he's willing to kill for it." When they reached Cassandra's hotel, Malik parked the SUV 2 blocks away. "Safer not to go straight to the door," he explained. Cassandra looked at him, suspicion flickering again. But this time it wasn't disdain, it was fear disguised as skepticism. "So what now? I can't exactly call the police and hand them a clipboard. He'll bury me before they even open an investigation." Malik nodded. "Which is why we don't go to them. Not yet. We build a case, piece by piece, until we can't be ignored." Cassandra scoffed softly, though her eyes betrayed the truth. "You sound like you've done this before." Malik's jaw tightened. "I've seen cover-ups, in fires, in accidents, where people with power walked away clean and someone else paid the price. My father taught me you want justice, you have to fight for it, no matter how long it takes." Cassandra studied him, really studied him. The dirt under his nails, the scar near his jaw, the tired but determined eyes. She had always dismissed him as a nameless contractor, an inconvenience. But now she saw something different, resolve, born from years of being forced to stand outside doors that never opened for him. For the first time, she felt the smallest sting of shame. She looked down, whispered, "And what happens if we lose?" Malik's voice was steady. "Then Victor wins, and neither of us walks away." Later that night, Cassandra sat at the hotel desk, papers spread before her, Malik across from her with his battered notebook. They worked in uneasy silence. Cassandra piecing together board memos and financial reports, she remembered Victor controlling, Malik scribbling connections between shipments, shell companies, and accidents. Slowly, the pattern emerged: missing funds, diverted shipments, and now evidence of arson masked as negligence. Cassandra's chest tightened as she realized how carefully Victor had constructed the trap. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. "He's been planning this for months, maybe years." Malik nodded. "Which means he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." A sudden knock at the hotel door froze them both. Cassandra's eyes darted to Malik. He raised a hand for silence, moved to the door, and peered through the peephole. A hotel attendant stood outside, tray in hand. Malik's body stayed tense, but Cassandra moved past him, opening the door with forced calm. "Room service, ma'am," the young man said. Cassandra frowned. "I didn't order anything." The attendant blinked, then looked down at the tray, confusion etched on his face. "Room 1207, Wyatt, correct?" She hesitated. Malik's hand shot out, grabbing the tray. He lifted the lid, his face tightening at what he saw. A single manila envelope, no food in sight. He shut the door quickly, dropped the tray on the table. Cassandra stared, her pulse spiking. Malik slid the envelope open. Inside were photos, grainy shots of Cassandra herself leaving the warehouse, Malik at her side, both caught in headlights. Scrawled across one in thick black marker, "One more step, and it ends." Cassandra's breath hitched. Malik's eyes narrowed, fury flashing. "They're watching us, closely." Cassandra sank into the chair, the weight of it pressing her down. She had always been the one pulling strings, commanding rooms, dictating the narrative. Now she was the target of someone else's game, her life reduced to threats on glossy paper. For the first time, she looked across the table at Malik, not as an intruder, not as an unwanted savior, but as the only person standing between her and oblivion. Her voice, quiet but firm, cut through the fear. "Then we stop running. We go on offense." Malik leaned forward, the scar on his brow catching the light. "That means risk. That means baiting him into showing his hand. Are you ready for that?" Cassandra met his gaze, the steel of a CEO flashing through the cracks of fear. "I didn't build an empire by folding when I was cornered. If Victor thinks he can bury me, he's about to learn the cost of underestimating me." For a brief moment, Malik almost smiled, a flicker of respect breaking through. He closed the envelope, slid it aside, and tapped the table. "Then we start tomorrow. We find the thread that ties all this together, and we pull until Victor's whole empire unravels." Cassandra nodded once, her pride finally aligned not against him but with him. Still, her hand brushed the photos again, her stomach tight with unease. "Tomorrow," she whispered, more to herself than him. "And tomorrow better not be too late." Outside the window, the city lights flickered like distant fires, silent witnesses to the uneasy alliance forged in the shadows of betrayal. Pride had brought them here, danger kept them bound, and now, for the first time, Cassandra Wyatt and Malik Johnson were no longer enemies, but co-conspirators in a war against the man who sought to destroy them both. The following evening, the city felt sharper, as if every light carried a hidden eye, every shadow a lurking threat. Cassandra Wyatt stood in the dim glow of her hotel room, staring at her reflection in the window. She had chosen her outfit deliberately black, sleek, blending into the night. Not the armor of a CEO commanding a boardroom, but the uniform of someone stepping into war. Behind her, Malik double-checked the recorder he had borrowed from Ray, testing its red light, his movements calm but precise. "We can't just walk into this," Cassandra said, her voice edged with tension. Malik didn't look up. "That's exactly what we're doing, walking in, but on our terms." He slipped the recorder into his pocket, then met her eyes. "Victor thinks you're broken, thinks he's already won. That's what makes him sloppy. Tonight we make him show it." They left the hotel through the service entrance, Malik's battered truck waiting in the alley. Cassandra slid into the passenger seat, her hands gripping her knees. She hated the smell of oil and worn leather, but tonight she said nothing. Her pride had bent to something harder: survival. The drive to the riverfront was quiet, except for the hum of the engine and the sound of rain beginning to patter against the windshield. Victor Hale had called the meeting himself. A text sent earlier that day. "We should talk. Meet me at the Pier 14 warehouse, 10 p.m. Come alone." Cassandra hadn't responded, but Malik's plan had formed quickly. They would go together, record everything, bait Victor into admitting what he had done. It was risky, maybe suicidal, but it was the only way forward. When they arrived, the warehouse loomed against the river, its corrugated walls slick with rain, a single light glowing above the door. The place smelled of salt and rust. Malik killed the engine, scanning the lot. "2 cars," he murmured, pointing. One was Victor's sleek sedan, the other a dark SUV with tinted windows. Cassandra's pulse quickened. "He brought backup." Malik nodded grimly. "Of course he did. Inside, The warehouse echoed with the drip of water and the distant hum of the river. Victor Hale stood near a stack of crates, immaculate in his tailored coat, his silver hair gleaming under the lone overhead bulb. His smile was practiced, polished, the kind that had charmed investors and crushed competitors. "Cassandra," he greeted, his voice smooth as silk. "You came. I knew you would." His eyes flicked briefly to Malik, disdain curling at the corner of his mouth. "And you brought the help." Predictable. Cassandra forced herself forward, her heels clicking against the concrete. She held her chin high, masking the knot in her stomach. "Cut the performance, Victor. We both know why we're here." Victor's smile didn't falter. He spread his hands as if in benevolence. "Yes, we do. You've become a liability, Cassandra. Your arrogance, your stubbornness. It was only a matter of time before it caught up with you. I gave you every chance to step aside gracefully." His eyes sharpened. "But you didn't." Malik shifted slightly, positioning himself closer to her side, every muscle tight. He wanted to speak, to call Victor out, but this was Cassandra's moment. She let her laughter spill, cold and brittle. "So the fire, the masked man, that was your version of graceful?" Victor's smile slipped, replaced by a thin, sharp edge. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Collateral, Cassandra, you taught me that yourself. Sometimes, sacrifices are necessary for the bigger picture." He didn't notice Malik's hand in his pocket, pressing the recorder on. The small red light blinked unseen. Cassandra's heart pounded, but she kept her mask firm. "And what's the bigger picture, Victor? Taking everything I built, turning my company into your playground?" Victor's eyes gleamed. "It was never yours alone. You think investors care about your vision? They care about stability, about control, and I can give them both. Without you." His tone hardened. "By the time the next board vote comes, you'll be disgraced, sued and buried in scandal. They'll beg me to take over. And you'll fade, another casualty of your own ego." Malik couldn't stay silent. His voice cut through the air. "You tried to kill her, twice. That's not stability, Victor. That's murder." Victor turned to him, disdain dripping. "And who are you? A mechanic? A nobody who got lucky pulling her out of the fire? You think anyone will believe your word over mine? You're already painted as the criminal." Cassandra's throat burned, fury and fear twisting inside her. For so long she had believed in her own untouchability, but now she saw it clearly. The man she had trusted, the man she had allowed so close, was willing to destroy her for power. And Malik, the one she had dismissed, was the only person standing against him. She drew herself up, voice sharp as glass. "You're wrong, Victor. Someone will believe, because you just admitted it." Victor froze, his eyes narrowing. Malik pulled the recorder from his pocket, holding it up so the red light glowed in the dim warehouse. For the first time, Victor's smile cracked. "You'll never get out of here with that." He snapped his fingers, and the warehouse door slammed open. Two men from the SUV strode in, heavy and armed, their footsteps pounding against the concrete. Cassandra's breath hitched. Malik shoved the recorder into her hands, whispering fiercely, "Run, now." But Cassandra didn't move. Her pride, her fear, her anger all collided into something fierce. "Not without you," she hissed. The men closed in, the sound of rain pounding harder against the tin roof, the air charged with violence. Victor's voice rang out cold and final. "This ends tonight." "Oh." Cassandra gripped the recorder tight. Malik squared his shoulders, and for the first time they stood not as enemies, not even as uneasy allies, but as two people bound by the same fire, ready to face death together if it meant dragging Victor's truth into the light. The warehouse air was thick with the metallic scent of rain dripping through the roof and the tension of lives balancing on a knife's edge. Victor stood near the crates, his coat immaculate even as his men closed in with heavy boots echoing against the concrete. Cassandra's grip on the recorder was so tight her knuckles blanched, her mind a storm of fear and defiance. Malik shifted his stance, placing himself slightly ahead of her, his body instinctively ready to shield. "Hand it over," Victor commanded, his voice silk-wrapped steel. "And maybe I'll let you walk away tonight." Cassandra met his eyes, her voice steady though her heart pounded. "You just admitted everything, Victor. You think a little muscle will erase that?" Victor's smile returned, cold and controlled. "A tape in your hand is nothing if you don't live to play it." He gestured, and the two men advanced. Malik didn't wait. He lunged first, swinging a rusted length of pipe he had snatched from the ground. The clash was immediate metal against fists, grunts breaking the silence as the fight erupted. One of Victor's men swung wide, the crowbar whistling past Malik's ear. Malik countered with a sharp strike to the ribs, the man stumbling back. Cassandra backed against the wall, clutching the recorder, her chest heaving. She had faced boardroom wars, hostile takeovers, lawsuits that clawed at her reputation, but never this. Never raw violence inches from her face. For one dizzying moment she thought of running, but then Malik's voice, raw with effort, cut through. "Don't you dare let go of that recorder." The second man came fast, pinning Malik against the crates, his forearm pressing against Malik's throat. Malik gasped, vision flashing white, but he slammed his knee upward, breaking free with a surge of strength born from desperation. He grabbed the man's jacket, twisted, and threw him into the stack of barrels. The crash rang out like thunder, liquid sloshing inside the drums. Cassandra flinched, but her eyes locked on Malik, on the blood running fresh down his temple where a blow had connected. He was outnumbered, battered, but unbroken. Victor's voice rose, sharp with anger now. "Enough of this circus. Take her." One of the men lunged toward Cassandra. She recoiled, heart leaping into her throat, but Malik intercepted, yanking the man backward with a roar. The fight spilled closer to the river-facing wall, where glass panes rattled under the force. Malik slammed his fist into the attacker's jaw, but the other was already up again, crowbar raised high. Cassandra's scream echoed as Malik ducked just in time, the crowbar smashing through glass, shards raining down. The chaos stretched on, brutal and unrelenting, until Malik managed to wrench the crowbar free, swinging it with a strength that dropped one of the men to the floor. The other hesitated, blood at his mouth, but Victor's glare spurred him forward again. This time, Cassandra moved. She had never been in a fight in her life, her weapons always words and contracts, but instinct overrode fear. She grabbed a broken shard of glass from the floor, holding it tight, her voice trembling but fierce. "Don't touch him." The attacker froze, momentarily stunned at the sight of the CEO, who once sneered at construction workers, now standing with glass trembling in her hand like a blade. That pause was enough. Malik slammed the man backward, his body collapsing into the barrels once more. Silence fell heavy, broken only by rain and the ragged breathing of those still standing. Malik dropped the crowbar, chest heaving, his arms trembling with exhaustion. Cassandra's hand shook violently, the glass slipping from her fingers as it clattered to the floor. Victor, still pristine, still controlled, looked at them with simmering rage. "You think this ends here? That recorder won't save you. Power isn't in truth, it's in control, and I control everything." "Oh." Cassandra, still panting, lifted the recorder high. For the first time, her voice cut through the air not as a businesswoman but as a survivor who had been pushed too far. "You control nothing, Victor. Not me, not this company, not my life." Malik stepped forward, blood dripping down his cheek, his presence solid beside her. "Game's over. You tried to bury the truth, but now it's out." Victor's calm cracked, his mask slipping. He lunged forward, hand outstretched for the recorder, but Cassandra stepped back into the light spilling from the broken glass, the city skyline behind her. She realized in that instant how fragile pride was, how useless it became when faced with real danger. And yet, she also realized how strong she could be when she wasn't standing alone. She met Victor's eyes and said, steady and clear, "Justice isn't luck, and it isn't yours to buy." "Oh." Behind them, the sound of sirens began to wail, faint but growing louder. Malik had managed, earlier in the chaos, to hit the emergency beacon on his phone, sending their location out. Victor's eyes flickered toward the sound, calculation running across his features. For the first time, he looked cornered. He straightened his coat, fury controlled into a thin sneer. "This isn't over," he spat. "Not by a long shot." But Cassandra no longer flinched. Malik no longer stood alone. Together, battered but unbroken, they had forced the mask off the man who had tried to kill them both. The warehouse stank of sweat and rust, glass littered the floor, and blood marked the fight, but in that chaos, truth had finally taken root. The warehouse lights flickered as the sound of sirens swelled outside, bouncing off the walls and echoing across the river. Rain hammered harder against the tin roof, each drop beating like a drum of inevitability. Cassandra Wyatt stood with the recorder clutched in her hand, the red light still blinking, Malik beside her battered but unbowed. Across from them, Victor Hale stood in the dim glow, his mask of confidence cracking at the edges. His men groaned on the ground, defeated, and for the first time the CFO who had plotted every detail of her downfall seemed like what he truly was, a desperate man. The sirens grew louder, blue and red strobes leaking through the broken panes of glass. Victor's eyes darted to the doors, calculating, his voice sharp as a knife. "You think the police will save you? I own the story. I own the narrative. They'll believe what I tell them. You'll be painted as hysterical, and him," he pointed to Malik, sneering, "he'll stay the criminal they already think he is." Cassandra drew herself up, her breathing heavy but her voice steady. "Not this time, Victor." She held the recorder higher, letting the blinking light gleam in the dark. "This time your words are your own noose." For years, she had stood in boardrooms with perfect poise, but this was different. This wasn't about shares or votes. This was about truth and survival. She turned her head slightly toward Malik. "Stay with me," she whispered, not as a command but as something closer to trust. Malik gave a single nod, blood still drying at his temple, his body aching from the fight but his presence unwavering. The warehouse doors burst open and officers flooded in, guns raised, flashlights cutting sharp beams across the scene. "Drop your weapons, hands where we can see them." Victor froze, then slowly raised his hands, the perfect picture of a man wronged. His voice slipped easily into its rehearsed calm. "Officers, thank God you're here. I was attacked by these two trespassers. They've been threatening me." Cassandra's voice cut clean through his lies. "He's lying." She stepped forward, rain dripping through the broken glass onto her shoulders. She held the recorder high, her voice ringing with authority she hadn't realized was still hers. "This device holds his confession. He set the fire. He sent men after me. He admitted it all." The room shifted in an instant. The officers glanced at one another, then at the blinking red light. One of them moved forward, carefully taking the recorder from her hand. Victor's composure cracked further, his face pale, his jaw tightening. "That's fabricated, doctored. You can't." Malik's voice boomed, cutting him off. "No editing, no tricks. I turned it on before he opened his mouth. It's all there." His gaze locked on Victor with raw defiance. "Your power ends tonight." The officers cuffed Victor's men first, dragging them to their feet. Then they turned to Victor himself. For the first time, he didn't smile. His eyes darted to Cassandra, dark with venom. "You think this is over? You don't know how deep it goes. You'll regret this." Cassandra met his stare without flinching. "The only regret I have is trusting you." As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, Victor finally lost his composure, shouting curses as he was dragged toward the waiting squad cars outside. The storm outside matched the storm inside Cassandra. Relief, exhaustion, fury all tangled together. She turned to Malik, seeing the man she had dismissed, mocked, even sued. His shirt was torn, his body bruised, but his eyes were steady, focused only on her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Cassandra's voice broke the silence, softer than it had been in years. "You saved me, not just from the fire, not just from that attack, but from myself, from believing I was untouchable." Malik shook his head, his voice rough but sure. "You saved yourself the moment you chose to stop hiding behind pride. I was just the one shouting loud enough to get through." His words sank into her like the rain soaking through her coat, cold but cleansing. Outside, reporters had already gathered, cameras flashing as Victor was shoved into a police car. Cassandra and Malik stepped out together, the storm wind whipping at their clothes. For once, Cassandra didn't rush to the cameras, didn't try to control the narrative. She let the sight speak for itself, the powerful CFO in cuffs, and beside her, the man she had once tried to erase from the story standing tall as her ally. One reporter shouted a question, "Miss Wyatt, how do you explain your survival after everything?" Cassandra paused, then lifted her chin, her voice carrying over the storm. "Not luck, truth, and courage." She glanced at Malik, her words weighted with meaning. "Both are stronger than lies." Later, when the chaos dimmed and the city had swallowed the news into its endless churn, Cassandra sat with Malik on the steps outside the station. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp. the pavement gleaming. They sat in silence, shoulders close, exhaustion pulling at them both. Finally, Cassandra exhaled, long and slow. I built my life believing I couldn't rely on anyone. That trust was weakness. Tonight proved me wrong. Malik tilted his head toward her, his gaze calm. Trust isn't weakness. It's choosing the right person to fight beside you. She gave a small, wry smile, the kind that hinted at the woman she had been and the one she was becoming. Then maybe I chose right this time. He didn't smile back, but his silence carried agreement, and that was enough. As dawn broke, the city skyline glowed gold, the river reflecting the first light of day. Cassandra Wyatt and Malik Johnson sat in the quiet after the storm, two lives from different worlds, bound not by chance but by fire, betrayal, and the hard-won truth. They had survived not because of luck, but because together they had forced justice into the light.